Synod of Bishops for the Universal Church was established by Pope St. Paul VI on September the 15th, 1965. He did so in response to the desire of the Fathers of the Second Vatican Council to keep alive the spirit of collegiality engendered by the conciliar experience. Pope Francis dedicated this year's Synod to the theme of young people, the faith, and vocational discernment. EWTN covered the event wall to wall, bringing daily programming to our viewers internationally from Rome. Through this special episode of Vaticano, we'd like to review the events to help you understand the process and influence of the Synod, showing you how the meeting developed and what its conclusions were. Stick around for the whole story on October's Synod on this week's Vaticano. A synod is an assembly of bishops gathered on a specific theme to help the Roman pontiff govern the universal church by offering their counsel. This year's Ordinary Synod was the 15th ever. Cardinal Lorenzo Baldisseri, as the Synod of Bishops Secretary General, was tasked with organizing the assembly together with his undersecretary, Bishop Fabio Fabene. October's Synod meetings in Rome themselves were the culmination of a long process that started with the definition of the theme of young people, faith, and vocational discernment, announced by Pope Francis on October the 6th, 2016. A few months later, on January the 13th, 2017, the Holy Father issued a letter to young people together with a preparatory document for the Synod, giving his guidelines. On November the 21st, Pope Francis announced the official dates of the Youth Synod. From April the 2nd to the 9th, 2017, an international meeting was held with leaders engaged in youth ministry worldwide, during which the Synod journey was explained. On June the 14th, the Synodal Committee published an online questionnaire to gather thoughts from youth worldwide about topics mentioned in the preparatory document. From the 11th to the 15th of September 2017, in Rome, an international seminar was held on the present situation of young people. From March the 19th to the 24th, 2018, 300 young people from all over the world participated in a pre-synodal meeting in Rome, where the summary, as well as the responses to the online questionnaire, provided the basis for the Instrumentum Laboris, or working document, that was issued on June the 19th, 2018. And then, during the October the 3rd to the 28th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops, the Instrumentum Laboris was discussed, modified, and voted, paragraph by paragraph. At the conclusion, that became the final document that was offered to Pope Francis. Going forward, this document will help him to give new impetus and direction to youth ministry in the Universal Church. The pre-synod process played a crucial role ahead of October's assembly. Much work was done during this period to prepare for the event. In his letter to youth and preparatory document, Pope Francis decided that the youth would be protagonists of this synod. The Holy Father asked the bishops to be attentive to the voice of the young people. Following the desire of the Pope, from June to December of 2017, the Synodal Commission offered an online questionnaire composed of 53 questions to all youth, believers and non-believers, to hear their voice, to understand the context in which young people of today live, and their expectations from the Church. To underscore the universality of the Church and to monitor the online questionnaire, the Synod Committee invited young people and their pastors from all over the world to participate at the International Seminar in Rome in September of 2017. A young participant from Down Under, Ashley Green, shared her perspective on the conclusions of the answers from 15,000 young Australians.
And interestingly, when young people were able to rate the Church's ability to listen to young people, the Church was rated as a 6 out of 10. So there's so much potential to improve in the way that the Church listens to young people, and this seminar is a really great opportunity to provide that.
We wanted it precisely for a discussion, a dialogue, to shed light on what is the situation of young people in the 5 continents. And indeed, the Church wants to accompany these young people in the choices of their lives. And here comes discernment, because it is a theme of the next synod. They must know how to choose the path of their lives.
Devono saper scegliere qual è la strada della loro vita.
Finding vocation is something that's important to everyone. I don't think it's possible to live a full and meaningful life without spending time discerning and spending time searching for that vocation.
The acts of this seminar were offered to the Holy Father and later contributed to the Synod's working document, the Instrumentum Laboris.
I invite you this week to express yourselves frankly and freely. As I said, and repeat, be brazen. You are the protagonists, and it is important that you speak openly. But I am embarrassed that the Cardinal will hear me. Let him hear. He is used to it. I assure you that your contribution will be taken seriously.
Pope Francis gave this promise to 300 young people gathered in Rome at the pre-synodal meeting that took place from the 19th to the 24th of March 2018. The purpose of the meeting was to provide the opportunity for young people to contribute to the Synod's working document, the Instrumentum Laboris, which would express the state of youth outreach in the Church, their ideas, wishes, and recommendations. Pope Francis himself verbalized his own reasons for doing something different and allowing young people the opportunity to draft a document for the Synod Fathers.
Una cosa è la prudenza, che è una virtù, ma un'altra è la paura.
One thing is prudence, which is a virtue, but another is fear. We need you, young people, living stones of a church with a young face, but not made up. As I said, not artificially rejuvenated, but revived from within. And you challenge us to emerge from the logic that says, but it's always been like that. And that logic, please, is poisonous. It is a sweet poison because it calms your soul and leaves you as though you were anesthetized, unable to walk. Emerge from the logic of, it has always been done this way, so as to follow creatively the tracks of authentic yet creative Christian tradition.
Together with the young representatives convened in Rome, around 15,000 young people were engaged online through social media. With over 220,000 responses to the online survey, the summary of the pre-synodal meeting was the main source of information contributing to the working document. This Instrumentum Laboris was then approved by Pope Francis on June 19, 2018, and was presented at the Holy See Press Office. One of two special secretaries of the Synod on Youth, Father Giacomo Costa, said then that the document reflected the three strongest points that young people expected the Synod Fathers to discuss.
Three dimensions in which they want the Church to change. One, it's a more authentic Church. They don't want a perfect Church, a high standard which you cannot attain, so authenticity. Then a more relational Church. Not occupied, not always centered on structures, but on relations. This is really a very, very important dimension. And then a community engaged for justice. And not in an abstract justice, not the concept of something very far from their life, but engaged in tackling situations in which they concretely suffer and have problems, such as surely the environmental questions, but also migrations and also all the discrimination issues, because more it's something they feel, more they want the Church engaged in an authentic and relational way.
All of this led to buzz among young Catholics worldwide and big expectations on the ground in Rome for the Youth Synod. In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. More on Vaticano begins now. The Synod on Youth was highly anticipated not only by Catholics but also by non-Catholics and the media because of some developments that happened right before it commenced in October. A few days from the opening of the Synodal Assembly, Pope Francis promulgated the Apostolic Constitution Episcopalis Communio on the structure of the Synod of Bishops. The Pope modified some elements of the synodal rules. The most significant was that according to the theme and the circumstances, additional people could be called to the assembly of the Synod, even those not conferred with the episcopal munus. In other words, they need not be bishops. And in fact, 2 non-ordained religious brothers were invited to attend the Synod and were given the right to vote as full members. Women religious were also invited to participate at the Synod, yet without the right of voting on the final text of the Synod document. Another new element was that once the final document was prepared by the Synodal Fathers, if approved explicitly by the Roman Pontiff, the final document would become the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter.
If it is approved, it means it becomes the magisterium of the Church. Now, if it is then an apostolic exhortation, we cannot know. It has never happened before. It has always been an apostolic exhortation.
There were expectations that the discussions would also touch on recent developments, such as the clerical sex abuse scandals, the Vatican's agreement with the Chinese government, the place of women in the Church, and pastoral care for youth with homosexual tendencies. Keeping in mind the complexity of the issues, critics and controversies, and the great attention of the world's media, on September the 29th, the Holy Father invited all the faithful to pray the Holy Rosary every day, during the entire Marian month of October, asking the Holy Mother of God and Saint Michael the Archangel to protect the Church from the devil, who always seeks to separate us from God and from each other.
May the Spirit grant us the grace to be synodal fathers, anointed with the gift of dreaming and of hoping. We will then, in turn, be able to anoint our young people with the gift of prophecy and vision.
With the invitation of the Holy Spirit, under the protection of Saint Michael the Archangel and Saint Joseph, Pope Francis opened the 15th Ordinary Session of the Synod of Bishops on October the 3rd. Very significant was the presence of 2 bishops from mainland China who came to participate in the Synod. It was the first time in history, and it was possible because of the Vatican-China Agreement from September. The mechanics behind the Synod were quite straightforward. Participants were invited to participate in 2 sessions every day. The morning session from 9 to 12:30, and the afternoon session from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. It was similar to the synods before it, but with its own character.
This synod has been quite unique in many ways. The hands-on participation of Pope Francis in the preparation for the synod. He's at every council meeting, he's been at and he held all these different meetings with the young people before the synod, and he's been present at every single session when he's been able to.
In the Synod we talked a lot about listen to each other. We talked about giving young people the space in church that they can find their own path, but they are accompanied by churchill responsible persons like pastoral workers, priests, the clergy and also lays.
It's been a great pleasure to be in the heart of the church in the world, to see the Pope like every day. It's like a miracle for me. And each day I keep praying that I don't overlook this opportunity and get so used to it and think it's just a normal thing. So every day is new for me. So I'm really happy, and I'm particularly touched by his person, the Pope, his humility, his friendliness, his warmth. I can't even express it. So I am really, really happy about it. Then most importantly, I'm happy to be part of this synod because we're making history already, and I'm happy to be part of it, as humble as I am, as ordinary as I am. So that the church has given me the opportunity to be here and to represent the young people of Nigeria, it's something that I would always cherish for the rest of my life.
The participants were seated according to an old tradition called precedence, meaning cardinals up front, archbishops behind, followed by diocesan bishops, auxiliary bishops, then priests and young people in the back. Auditors and experts were also present. They attend by invitation and can take part in discussions, but are not allowed to vote on the final document. The discussions focused on specific sections of the working document. It was divided into 3 sections: recognizing, interpreting, and choosing. The first section analyzed the condition of contemporary youth, the second spoke of the importance of discernment, and the third offered orientations to the Synod Fathers and decisions to be taken. Short speeches called interventi were given by Synod Fathers on the section of their choice. After each 5 interventi speeches, there were 5 minutes of pause for reflection and prayer. The full assembly was complemented by 14 breakout working groups divided up by language, allowing for further detailed discussion and concrete proposals for the reworking of the working document by way of modi, or propositions. In all, hundreds of modi were proposed that all were considered in the elaboration of the final document. The sessions were closed to the media and to the public. To inform the outside world about what was happening inside the Synod Hall, the Vatican held briefings with media over the lunch break. There were, however, events open to the public, such as the canonization Mass on October the 14th. Pope Francis solemnly proclaimed sainthood for Pope Paul VI, the very pontiff that established the Synod of Bishops. Pope Francis also made Archbishop Oscar Romero and another 5 blesseds saints, including the 19-year-old Nunzio Suprizio, offering him to youth as an example to follow.
Nunzio Suprizio, the saintly, courageous, humble young man who encountered Jesus in his suffering, in silence, and in the offering of himself. All these saints, in different contexts, put today's word into practice in their lives, without lukewarmness, without calculation, with the passion to risk everything and to leave it all behind.
Before the voting for the final document, the Synod Fathers, together with experts and auditors, including the young people themselves, made a symbolic 5-kilometer pilgrimage to the tomb of St. Peter, along what's called the Via Francigena, the Way of St. Francis. Walking, praying, and conversing, the bishops and cardinals fully implemented the meaning of the Greek word synod, which means walking together. Many synodal fathers went on to say that for them the fruit of the synod wasn't just the final document, but also the time they spent together with the Holy Father, each other, and with young people. And that's how they came up with the idea to write a letter from the Synod Fathers to young people. As the final document was taking shape, EWTN senior contributor Matthew Bunson caught up with Archbishop Anthony Fisher of Sydney, Australia, for an update.
We're days away now. I know you've received the draft report, the final report, but I also know you're working as part of a committee on a letter for young people, so sort of a long report and then a short report. Let's start with that letter that's going to be going out. What are you hoping to accomplish with that?
The letter, we hope, will speak directly to young people, whereas the report is very much a report to the whole church and especially to the bishops of the world and those involved in youth ministry. This is the bishop speaking directly to young people. It's short, to the point. I hope it will be inspiring so that it will make people want to be united to Christ and his church and excited about their vocation and the great things they can do with Christ and the church.
And I have to ask your reaction, to the degree that you're comfortable talking about it, to the final report.
We're still very much in the process of revising the final report, and so it's still a bit unpredictable where it's going to go. It's not as long as the first draft. That's good. I think it should be shorter again. But we know Vatican documents have been getting longer and longer. I think that some of the language will be puzzling to a lot of ordinary readers. There's a lot of the language of discernment, accompaniment, synodality. These are very in-house churchy words. It's going to take a lot of explanation if people are going to wade through them to get to the real gems. But there are some beautiful things in this document too that I hope people will discover for themselves.
And one of those beautiful things, we assume, is helping to foster in young people that encounter with Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. In the end, the Church has nothing to offer the world but Jesus Christ. But if people discover Jesus Christ, they get everything. And so if we can, through documents like this, but much more importantly through the planning, the evangelical energy that it gives to people, can present Christ afresh to young people and bring some more of them close to him, they'll discover that opens out their whole world, their whole horizon, and hopefully they will want to be saints with him.
Stick around for more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
Grazie.
The final document of the Synod of Bishops' 15th General Session was approved in full by the Synod Fathers and released late Saturday, September the 27th. The document is divided into 3 parts and 12 chapters. The topics include migration, the digital age, art, music, sport, violence and persecution, suffering, education, seminary formation. On the issue of sexuality, the document insists on finding the adequate methods to convey the beauty of the Christian vision of the body and sex. On the difference between male and female identity and sexual inclinations, the Synod Fathers affirmed that it was reductive to use sexual desire or orientation as a starting point for defining a person's identity. While the session was convened to discuss the topics of young people, the faith, and vocational discernment, the concept of synodality also emerged as a key subject in the final text. For many synodal fathers, there was surprise at finding synodality so prominent in the final document. And indeed, paragraph 121 of the final document that explains synodality received the least votes. We reached out to Father Robert Gall, professor of ethics at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, for an explanation.
There's controversy about this term synodality, which there's a whole section in the 3rd section of the final document that's dedicated to synodality. And there's controversy about this for 2 reasons. First of all, because it wasn't spoken of really at all during the synod hearings. And secondly, because some people see it as a way of decentralizing church doctrine, such that we could have different teaching of the church in different locations. This is associated, the second point of the controversy, associated with people who think that the synod could resemble a democratic process, such that church teaching becomes the fruit of consensus coming up from the people. Now, of course, that would be a misinterpretation, because the church receives revelation from God himself and communicates and hands down this revelation to the people. Divine revelation is not a fruit of consensus, it's God speaking to his people. So that would be a mistaken understanding of synodality. And this is why Pope Francis had the International Theological Commission, which is a consulting body of the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith, study the topic of synodality. And they came out with a text in last May of 2018, which studies synodality and sees how it is rooted back in the Church Fathers. Well, we have World Youth Day on the horizon in Panama, and this will be a moment of implementation of exactly these teachings that Pope Francis is referring to in the final synod document and to whatever he might be writing in this potential post-synodal exhortation. So World Youth Day, I think, will be a wonderful occasion for these ideas to crystallize in the pen of Pope Francis.
More than the document, however, it is important to promote a way of being and of working together young and old, in listening and in discernment, in order to arrive at pastoral choices that respond to reality.
Alla realtà.
So where does it go from here? Father Gall said that it's really not the end, but an ongoing discussion.
Because the Synod is a characteristic that is permanent for the Catholic Church, and that we are all on a pilgrim path with Jesus on the way to heaven. We shouldn't think that heaven can be reduced to a document or to a text. So we must live this document in our hearts. Pope Francis has emphasized that the final paragraphs of the final document are what's most important, and they speak of holiness, so the call to holiness of all of the people of God.